I was trying to find a suitable introduction for our guest. I found a dictionary which described him, I thought, rather quietly as reliable all-purpose director on particularly awkward projects. I'd like to prefer the one that's given me, personally, film for film, probably more sheer pleasure than any other director. Ladies and gentlemen, Richard Fleischer. Richard Fleischer, we were watching that last sequence there, Compulsion, and you tapped me on the shoulder as we were watching Orson Welles, and you said, "Ask me about that shot." So I have to ask you first about that shot.
I wonder why I asked you that. That big close-up that you saw of Orson had a lot of camera noise in it. I shot that scene with 3 cameras simultaneously. And being that close to him, we picked up a lot of noise on the soundtrack. And when the time came for me to revoice him for that, because of the imperfect soundtrack, we had gotten into a difficult situation with Orson. It was his last day on the film, and the sheriff had just garnished his salary, so he wasn't going to get paid for making the movie. And he was in big trouble, and he was leaving in a few hours for China on a slow boat. No kidding. Anyhow, we got into the looping room, the ADR room, and he went through everything rather really cursory until we got to this shot. Now, I'd had trouble with him all through this courtroom scene. He was afraid of making that last shot. He just had stage fright, really. And he kept putting it off and putting it off. I was ready to shoot it several times. He'd keep saying, no, wait, let me do it at the end. So I did. And then, unfortunately, we had trouble with the track. Well, when we came to this scene, and this came up on the screen, he said, I refuse to loop it. I refuse to replace the track. And I said, well, you have to listen to the sound. The hum of the camera is very noticeable. So he said, this is a case for the Screen Actors Guild, and I'm leaving. And he walked out and got on a boat and went to China. So we were stuck with this bad soundtrack. The editor, a wonderful, fabulous editor named William Reynolds, took that track and went through the picture, combed the picture for each word and each syllable and every vibration he could get off the track, and rebuilt that track from other soundtracks that we had in the film. And he did an absolutely fabulous job, so that what you're hearing is not, it's his voice, it's Orson's voice, but it's not the actual words that he said. They are his words, but they're taken from different parts of the picture. They did a fabulous job. And when I saw it the first time, I said, Bill, I got to congratulate you. You've just screwed Orson Welles.
Now, in fact, you actually didn't meet Welles until the first day of shooting. I mean,
that's right.
A rather awesome way to meet him, especially with a reputation like that. But in your book, which I'm sure a lot of you know about, This Moment to Cry, you mention there you're generally fairly kind about people, but you're also very frank about them too. And you say that you felt that perhaps he peaked too early. He had this huge reputation. Was that daunting to you at that stage?
Well, yes. He's a daunting character. If you saw him, you'd realize why. He is enormously fat. I mean, really huge, like a circus person. He was obscenely fat. And also, he had made the best movie I've ever seen in my life, and still is, which is Citizen Kane. So all of us, all of the young directors, were very impressed and very moved by his work. And we were all trying to imitate Orson Welles, and we all did. So he changed all of our careers by showing us how to direct this kind of realistic film. So he's an acknowledged genius. It's very difficult for a director to step in and meet him for the first time and see this huge bulk and realize that this is a genius director, and who are you to direct a genius director? So you have to be very careful, and you've got to be sure that you don't make any mistakes, because he knows you're going to make a mistake before you make it. It's a tough...
Did you feel that he was holding himself back at stages during the film, or I mean, apart from obviously your little fracas towards the end, was he generally generous?
He was wonderful during the film. I mean, he was an actor and I was the director, and we had a mutual respect going for each other. And I could feel underneath that there was a certain jealousy, because by this time Orson was not permitted to direct films, because studios and producers were very wary of him, because he was so profligate with their time and their money, and go way over budget, way over schedule. He would never finish pictures. So producers really were afraid of him and wouldn't trust him with the budgets of these big pictures. And he missed that very much. And I just knew that he was wishing that he was directing this film. Now, he never displayed that to me, except at one moment, when I was directing in a scene, and I said, now at the end of the scene, Orson, you see that wall on your left side, you walk down that wall, and at the end of it, there's a door, and you exit left through that door. And Orson looked at it, and he said to me, I think I should exit to the right. Now, there was no reason in the world for him to say that except to challenge me. It made no difference to the movie whether he went left or right. There was nothing to match into it. But there was a big problem with that, because there was no wall on the right-hand side. And I said, Orson, if you notice, there is no wall on the right-hand side, so you obviously cannot exit on the right. And then he really gave it to me. He said, you know what I would do if I were directing this picture? This came out at that moment. I said, no, Orson, what would you do? And he said, I'd wait until they built me that wall. I said, Orson, that is why I am directing this picture and you are not. And he bowed from the waist as much as his bulk would permit. And he said, I shall exit to the left. And so he did. And that was the end of our problems.
We'll come, I'm sure, go back to Compulsion. I do want to ask you a little bit about your entry into the industry. I mean, you come from a terribly famous dynasty of filmmaking, animation, obviously. Was there any pressure that you might have actually followed in that particular footstep? I mean, why did you go the way you did? Or why did you come away from that, or not go to animation?
Well, first of all, I didn't inherit, unfortunately, my father's ability to draw. My father was a wonderful artist. He was a painter and a sculptor and a great animator. And I just never inherited that gene. My sister did. My sister is a very good artist. But I had set my sights on being a psychiatrist. And there was no pressure on me to go into films, quite the opposite of that. You know, your parents don't want you to usually go into kind of a very risky business. And so I went to university, to Brown University, and took a pre-med course and majored in psychology. I took all the psychology courses and was very good at it. And by the time I graduated, I was also very much involved with theatrical productions and musical comedies. I wrote and directed and acted in the musical productions. And I thought that I would like to give the theater a try. And so I did, with my father's blessings. And I went to the Yale Drama School for 3 years and stayed in the theater from then on. While I was there, I was very lucky. I got my Master of Fine Arts degree, and that was about 52 years ago, and I found my wife there, and she's sitting right over there. Where are you, Mickey? Where is Mickey? There. It's our 51st anniversary, just next month.
One suspects that the psychiatry probably came in rather useful at later stages with some of the people you were dealing with. It was a result of, in fact, some of your Yale work that you got the summons to Hollywood, wasn't it, I think?
I organized a group of players from Yale, and we did theater in the round one summer and toured it around New England in various hotels. We did a different play each week. And at one of those performances, a talent scout from RKO Radio Pictures saw one of the plays and sought me out afterwards and said, "Young man, how would you like to come to Hollywood and direct movies?" And that's how I got into movies. So it's a Cinderella story. A likely story, but it's true.
Because you did it for a while before you actually got into long films. You did something called flicker flashbacks. Tell me about those, because I'm ashamed to say I've never seen any of those. Do they still exist?
Yes, they're on videotape. When it was time for me to go to Hollywood to pick up my contract, this wonderful talent scout said to me, "I don't think you should go out right now because RKO is in the midst of a changeover of personnel and studio heads." It was sort of a revolving door anyhow at RKO. There was always changing of heads. But he said, if you go out now in the middle of this turmoil, in 6 months you'll be back in New York and looking for a job. He said, I'll try to get you a job at Pathé News, RKO Pathé News in New York City. You'll learn about filmmaking and films and documentaries. And when things settle down in Hollywood, you can pick up the contract then. And I thought it was a splendid idea. There were no film schools at that time. So it was a tremendous break for me to work at RKO Pathé News. And while I was there, I wrote commentaries for newsreels and directed documentary films, and also had my own series that I developed of old films from around 1900 to 1908 or 9 or 10, in that area. And it required a lot of research into the history of movies and finding this old material and restoring it. And I made one-reelers that had 2 feature films and a newsreel and advertisements, just as though you were at Nickelodeon and from that period. But it gave me a great insight into it. I edited those films and wrote the commentary. They were very funny commentaries, deliberately funny. And those were called flicker flashbacks.
And these were shown as sort of as part of the program in movie houses generally?
Yes, at that time they had selected short subjects, as they call them, and they always had a feature, 2 features, and a newsreel and a short of some sort, a documentary or a comedy short. And my series was quite successful.
You then made your first movie, which I suppose those days were called B features, Child of Divorce, which actually was rather well received, wasn't it?
Yes, it was very well received. I can't open this up just now. You want to see me choke to death? Yes. Oh, you did it, thanks. Anyhow, no, it was very well received and kind of cemented my stay at RKO. Because at that time, you couldn't work for a major studio unless you were under contract, long-term contract, 7 years. Mm-hmm. And they had 6 months options on you, so that every 6 months they could let you go. You didn't have that option. You had to stay if they wanted you to stay. So it made buying a house a little risky. And you're never really quite sure you're going to be there the next 6 months. But the first film I made was a very successful small film, and I saw it not too long ago. It's still pretty good pictures.
Now, I promise we won't go through film by film, but I have to mention your second film, which I haven't seen. It sounds what they call, I suppose, a little oddity, but it introduces with banjo, and it introduces, I gather, well, intriguingly to what they call the preview process in Hollywood. Perhaps you'll tell us a bit about that.
That's a long story.
Oh, well, do an edited version.
I'll do the edited version. It was a real big picture, and it wasn't a very good one. And it starred a young actress who had played the lead in my previous picture, a young lady named Sharon Moffat, who was about 11 years old. And a very good little actress, and the studio was grooming her to become the next Shirley Temple or Margaret O'Brien. But this little butterfly, this chrysalis, did not turn into a butterfly, but she was good. And we were supposed to preview the picture downtown Los Angeles, where this kind of movie played very well for that kind of audience. But the producer had a bad back and he didn't want to go downtown, way down to downtown Los Angeles. So we previewed it in Westwood Village, which is a college town. College towns are notoriously tough on movies, and particularly at that time, because all of the major studios previewed their pictures in Westwood Village. There are only 2 theaters there then, there's about 30 now. So the people that went to see the preview, they first of all had to pay double price, and they had a big sign out, major studio preview tonight, and they all went in expecting to see one of the major motion pictures of the year, with Clark Gable and who knows what. And instead, they did not know that what they were going to see. So we went into the theater, and they had a couple of rows lined, blocked off for us executives. And the lights went down, and the trademark of RKO came on the screen, which was a globe of the world slowly revolving with a radio tower on top of jagged bits of electricity coming out. It said RKO Radio Pictures. As soon as the audience saw that, a great howl went up. Oh no! They didn't even like the studio. So the next thing comes along is the main title. It said Banjo. Well, they hadn't heard of banjo, but okay, you know, maybe because RKO did make the Fred Astaire Ginger Rogers movie, so that maybe they were getting away with something. Next title came on, it says starring Sharon Moffat. Well, that was the end of the world. The audience stood up en masse, started to boo and scream, and made a rush for the exits. And the ushers were pushing them back, saying, "You can't get your money back after you've seen the title of the picture." It was a pandemonium, and I immediately took down the red velvet things and started shouting with the rest of the crowd. I didn't want anyone to know who I was. It had something to do with this movie. And they started razzing the picture. So they were sitting there, and they finally got back in their seats and settled down very uneasy, a lot of noise. And the producer sitting next to me said, "Don't worry about it. They'll get involved in the movie in a little while and they'll settle down and watch it." He lied. They never let go of that picture. And in those days, it was sort of like going to the theater, because when a star made his first appearance in the film, the audience applauded during the preview. Well, when our stars appeared, who nobody had ever seen before, they got enormous ovations and great cheers, and Sharon Moffat got a standing ovation for them. And they did settle down a little bit until there was a shot of a telegraph boy delivering a telegram. Huge hand for him. Then the next shot was a bird in a bush. Another huge hand. They never let go. And finally the picture came to an end, and the audience went out backwards, booing and hissing and hooting at the theater. So that was my second movie. And I think that this white hair developed at that time.
It was a strange time in Hollywood then, of course, because House Un-American Activities was beginning to make its presence felt, and McCarthy was around then. You did actually sort of get involved, didn't you? I'm not asking your politics, but you did get involved in HUAC, didn't you, in its long arm?
Yes, in a very extraordinary way, very obscure way, because I was the most apolitical person anyone had ever met. The only organization I'd ever joined was the Automobile Club. And, I didn't even join the society that ran my children's nursery school. But at that time, the Directors Guild came up with a great idea of how to keep communists out of the Directors Guild, which was to have everyone sign a loyalty oath, as though we were all somehow disloyal citizens, and had to prove that we were not communists by signing a non-communist oath. And there was a referendum on this, and we all had to vote secretly whether this should be put into the contract. If you wanted to become a director, you had to sign the contract with the Directors Guild and sign the loyalty oath. And I resented it very much. So it was supposed to be a secret ballot. Well, I got calls from a lot of my friends saying, don't vote for it, I'm not voting for it. And we all agreed we would not vote for that thing. And we signed, I voted against it, and sealed it up in the ballot, in an envelope, and went away. The next day, the Hollywood Reporter, which is one of the two trade papers in Hollywood, printed the names of all the people who voted against that ballot. And there I was among about 10 or 12 other people, none of whom I'd ever heard of before. All my friends who had called me and said, vote against it, they didn't vote against it. But there I was hanging out on a limb, and I was sure my career was over. Nothing much happened, nothing much came of it, except I finally, when I was going to make a picture with Stanley Kramer, The Happy Time, one of the people at Columbia Studios, where the picture was being made, an executive called me into his office and said, we need a statement from you that you are not a communist. So I had to sign a statement. I wasn't a communist. I had already signed the non-communist oath anyhow, because I had to. And so that was my involvement. The other, and I think, are you talking about?
Well, about Zero Mostel, it was a sad.
Yes, well, we wanted Zero Mostel in the picture, and he was on the blacklist. And Stanley Kramer had a wonderful eye for casting, and he decided that we should use Zero in the picture. The man who played the part on the stage was Kurt Kasner, and he was fabulous, great actor, perfect for the role, but he wanted too much money. And Stanley Kramer decided he would try to get Zero Mostel to play the part because he was perfect as well. So we found Zero, and he hadn't worked in several years because of the communist business. And we walked in on him. He was living in a garret and living off a hot plate. And it was a very sad sight to see this man in such straits. And we offered him the picture, and he just about burst into tears. He was so grateful. And Stanley Kramer, bless his heart, offered him the same price that he was offering Kurt Kasner, and which was very generous, because he could have picked up Zero for nothing, really, because he was so desperate to work. But Stanley gave him the same money, agreed to do the picture. Naturally, he was delighted, thrilled with it. And about a week later, Stanley Kramer got a call from Harry Cohn, who was the head of Columbia, who said, you can't use him in the picture because he's a comic. And it got to the point of, you use Zero Mostel, there is no picture. So we unfortunately had to let him go, and it was a heartbreaking situation. And we eventually got Kurt Kasner to play the part. He was great. But we caused a great deal of anguish to this lovely man by trying to help him. It was really an ironic situation.
Meanwhile, your career now suddenly went from strength to strength. You've made again one or two other claim, I suppose, keep calling them B movies, Narrow Margin, Clay Pigeon, and so on. Then there was 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, which was the first, I suppose, big picture you did.
Yes.
Would that be fair?
Right.
Which had certain, say, poignancies, ironies. One because of presumably Disney's old rivalries with your family, and also you met someone called Kirk Douglas, who I believe figures fairly largely in your memories.
Right.
Tell us a bit first about the Disney Fleischer thing.
My father was Max Fleischer, the animated cartoonist, and a pioneer in the animation field and an inventor of the rotoscope. And he started his career with great success in about 1914. So he was many, many years ahead of Walt Disney. Disney didn't come into the picture until about 1921. My father invented a cartoon character called Coco the Clown, and they used to bring him out of the inkwell. My father appeared live in these films and drew the character on a drawing board. The character would come alive, jump off the board, and play the rest of the picture with my dad, crawling all over him and playing scenes together, getting into real live-action situations. They were very clever, very brilliant cartoons. But then Walt Disney came along and actually started by imitating my father's work. Then the years went by and there were great competitors, and Walt came up with Mickey Mouse, my father came up with Betty Boop, and then my dad put Popeye the Sailor on the screen. And the two men had quite a big rivalry. And finally, that tapered off through a series of problems my father had with Paramount. And Walt Disney eventually became the winner of the big contest.
Was there personal enmity at all?
They had never met, but my father resented Walt very much, first of all, for copying him, and secondly, because he kept stealing away my father's animators. My father would spend a lot of money training animators, building them up for years and years, and then Walt would come along. My father's studio was in New York. Walt would come along and offer them more money and kidnap them away to the coast, and my father resented that very much.
So when you got the Disney picture, did your father sort of quail at the thought of it, that you were going to go and work for the enemy?
Well, it was very interesting because I was in California. I was shocked when I got called to see Walt Disney. I had no idea what he wanted, and he said, "I'd like you to direct the biggest picture we've ever made. It's our first all live-action picture, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. Do you want to do it?" I said, "I'll give my right arm to do this picture, but you know who I am?" And he said, "Yes, I know. We want you to do the picture." So I said, "Well, I know this sounds ridiculous, but I really have to check with my father to see whether he would resent it, somehow feel I was being disloyal to him." So I understand that perfectly. You're right. Go ahead and do that. Call him up. My father was in New York. I said, "Call him up and let me know tomorrow morning whether you want to come to work for us." So I called my dad that night and told him the situation. And he said, "Of course you must make that film. Absolutely, there's no question about it." He said, "But I have a message for Walt. You give him a message for me." I said, "Of course." He said, "You tell him that he's got great taste in directors." And I thought that was a very nice, generous way of receiving this. Later on, when I was just about finishing the movie, my father came to California to visit me. And the two men got together. Walt invited him out to the studio. They met for the first time, and they got along extremely well and became friends. So it has a nice, happy ending to the whole thing.
And so we come to Kirk. Now you mentioned, so you mentioned Stanley Kramer earlier. I think you'd actually been on the set of Champion when Kramer was making it, and I think had sort of seen perhaps Kirk at his worst during the film, which presumably must have filled you with some trepidation when this vision joined you on 20,000 Leagues.
Well, you know, he's a very difficult man and very passionate guy, very emotional. violent kind of personality. And I was on the set of Champion when they had one of his famous explosions and screaming, shouting, Sturm and Drang kind of situations. So when he was cast to play Ned Land in 20,000 Leagues, I held my breath a little bit. But actually, we got along very well. Once I got the secret of working with him, which was very simply to put him in the middle of every shot. Once you did that, you didn't have any trouble with Kirk. He liked to be in the middle. He liked all the other actors with their back to the camera facing him. Called upstaging. You may have heard of that. And once I caught on to that, I really had no more trouble with him. It was a ridiculous conceit on his part, because all you have to do is come around with the camera. It's not like working in the theater. You come around the camera and shoot the other way, too. But as long as it was originally staged with him in the middle, there's no problem.
Was this kind of suggested to you by him? I mean,
well, very indirectly. He never came out and said it, because he was working with some very good actors, very experienced actors, Peter Lorre and Kirk, and he was a little too embarrassed to do that. So he would just keep saying, after I'd finished blocking out a scene and rehearsing with him, he'd say, I don't feel comfortable, I can't shoot it, I'm sorry, I don't feel comfortable. So I'd try something else and say, no, it doesn't feel right to me. He kept doing that until suddenly he'd say, yeah, that's it, oh, I feel great, I can do the scene now. And I'd say, what did I do? What was this magic that I worked? I had no idea. Until finally I started to analyze it, and then it came to me, there was a revelation. He was in the middle, and that's what made him happy, and that's what made everything work. So I did that to begin with, and saved a lot of time.
there was another lovely line, which has to be, which he tended to use to you, which was eventually thrown back at him. Has to be one of the great rhetorical questions, I think, which was, I have to quote this, does this have any value, you would say after. Yes. Presumably that was on pain of death that you...
Well, no, but it was a pain in the ass, I've got to tell you. You'd be working
be frank,
with him.
I mean,
You don't mind, I hope. You'd be working with him, and he would come in the morning, and you hope when an actor comes into work that he has something to offer you, some presents, some gifts, and say, do you think this is a good idea, or do you think this is a good idea? Well, he didn't bring in a little tray of goodies. He brought in a flea market full of goodies, and he had to try them all for you. Otherwise, he would pout and cause a lot of trouble, because we'd say, well, does this have any value? And he'd take his shirt off, because he always tried to take his shirt off. He had a great physique, and he was trying to show it. Or does this have any value? When he juggled some seashells. Does this have any value? When he chin himself on the door sill. So when the people after looking at it saying, no, I don't really like it, and then he would try something else. It took forever to get through that. But he kept saying, does this have any value? And one day while he and I were talking about something that didn't have much value, I guess, one of the assistant cameramen came up to me and he said, I'm sorry to interrupt, but that never happens. Nobody interrupts the star and the director when they're talking to each other. This guy came up and had a piece of glass in his hand. It was a camera filter. And he held it up. He said, I just wanted to ask you, does this have any value? Kurt turned white. You could see this flashing blue eyes of his. And we looked up, and there was the entire crew in a semicircle around us, standing with arms folded, waiting to see what his reaction would be. And he saw that, and he knew he was on the spot. He knew he was going to be a real nasty guy, or take it in good style, which he did. He burst into laughter. I thought a little forced, but he did laugh, and we all laughed. And from then on, it didn't stop him from saying, does this have any value? And he still kept doing all these ridiculous things. But he always made a little joke out of it. And at the end of the picture, he gave me a clip, a money clip, gold money clip. And it was engraved on it were the words, does this have any value? Affectionately, Kirk.
While we're on the subject of Kirk, we must move to the Vikings, which, I'm sure a lot of people of my generation here it was one of the sort of first and most significant films that certainly we ever saw in the mid-50s. Made a great effect, whether it was Janet Leigh's
so young.
and it's memorable and not incidentally to be seen if you watch it on television where it's been hacked to pieces. But you had Kirk here, of course, as a producer as well. Now, I gather he was actually a very good producer.
Yes.
But you had you've got, I think, a pretty good script together, or a script that you all seem to like, and suddenly the kind of climate changed. Why did that happen?
We had a marvelous script to begin with, and we'd worked a year preparing the film, writing the script and preparing it, researching it. And Kirk was very, very positive about everything, and he didn't cut any corners. He wanted to really make a great quality film. And he loved the script too. He left before we started shooting. He left and went to Germany to make a picture with Stanley Kubrick in Munich called Paths of Glory, which is quite a marvelous film. I left Hollywood with the script under my arm to go to Norway to start pre-production on the film and start filming second unit scenic things before the actors came in. And I got a message from Kirk to please route myself through Munich because he wanted to meet with me. So I went to Munich and I had dinner with him that night I got there, and at dinner were Stanley Kubrick and a very well-known writer named Calder Willingham. And at that meeting, at that dinner, I learned that Stanley Kubrick didn't like the dialogue in the script, and that Kirk had believed that and had hired Calder Willingham to rewrite the script. That's the first I'd heard of it at dinner. I didn't eat much dinner, and I was furious about it. And here I am now having meetings with Calder Willingham, and you see the dialogue of our script was, the original script, was very poetic and had really the feeling of the Viking period. And the author of the script really caught the flavor. Kubrick had told Kirk that actors couldn't speak those lines. Well, I was the director of the picture, and I thought that they could. But Kirk was so enamored of Kubrick that he believed him. So I had a choice of either quitting right then after a year of preparation and knowing that I was going to have a very good picture. I was sure of that one. So I really had to compromise and work with Willingham for a couple of days, talking about how we could make it more colloquial and everyday language and make it more of a comic strip, a comic book story, rather than the work of art we were all trying to make. So I left to start shooting the picture with no script at all, and with Calder Willingham writing it off in Munich. And I never got any pages until Kirk showed up to start shooting in the picture with the other actors. And then pages kept coming in, and I was trying to keep ahead of the pages. This is not an unusual situation, by the way. This happened to me several times. You usually go off half-cocked on a movie, no matter how long you take to prepare it. Anyhow, we were very lucky. The picture turned out well, but those pages were a source of great problems for me because they kept arriving all through the film. I never had a complete script. And the pages would go to some secretary who passed them out, and frequently I didn't get my copy. They were in Kirk's script, not in mine. We get on the stage or trying to do the scene. He was reading dialogue that I never heard before, or action that I was giving them that they didn't know about. And Kirk was accusing me of being confused about the story. And I go, I am confused. I don't have the pages for the scene. And this caused a great deal of argument and aggressiveness on both of our parts, and shouting matches. But I almost quit but I didn't, and I stuck with it, and it was a very successful picture. One of the better pictures that I made, so maybe he was right after all, who knows.
We're going to take a little break to show another clip now before we come back, and I hope when we come back there'll be some questions from the audience. We're going to in fact see a sequence from Fantastic Voyage, a 4-minute odyssey, I think through one of the arteries, or possibly through the heart.
I think through the heart.
I have been asked to tell you that it is apparently, and I do apologise in advance, a little bit pink in its quality. But Mr. Fleischer, do come down.
That's the colour of blood.
That's true. Sit down.
Or blue. Yes, quite a bit.
Before I ask for some questions, we talked about Kirk as an intriguing, rather egomaniacal character, if it's the right pronunciation. I was listening to your Kaleidoscope interview this afternoon. You were introduced, you probably prefer not to be done that way, but as the director of Dr. Dolittle, which is probably another way I'd introduce you, but it's one of the films you've done, in which you were involved with Rex Harrison. And that whole film seems to have been fraught with, unbelievable numbers of problems from mad people on your locations who tried to disrupt you. And in fact, in Richard Fleischer's book, he refers, I think rather sweetly, to there's this local twit in Castle Combe called Sir Ranulph Twizzleton Wickham Fiennes, who I ought to tell you is one of our great national heroes now. I think you correctly dismissed it at the time. But
it's a twit at that time, I think.
But Harrison himself was a problem. You had problems with casting. The piece of casting I'm fascinated about was, it was called Bumpo, who there was a toss-up at one stage between Sidney Poitier and Sammy Davis Jr. That must have been a considerable problem, wasn't it?
Well, it wasn't really a toss-up. We had actually cast Sammy Davis Jr. to play this part. It wasn't a very big part in the film, but he was perfect for it. And I had just come on the picture, as a matter of fact, and one of my first meetings with Rex Harrison in Portofino, suddenly the producer and I were sitting with Rex, really saying goodbye to him after we'd had our meetings, and suddenly Rex, we nicknamed him Tyrannosaurus Rex for a reason, because he suddenly said to us, "I don't want Sammy Davis Jr. in this picture." It's a great shock to us. He had already approved Sammy Davis long ago, and we all thought this was ideal, perfect casting for this native prince. Well, we said, but Sammy Davis is perfect for the part. He's one of the greatest entertainers in the world. And Rex said, that's exactly why I don't want him in the picture. He said, I don't want to make a picture with an entertainer. I want to work with an actor. He said, why don't you get Sidney Poitier for the role? Well, we were really rocked by this, because Sidney Poitier was a big star, distinguished actor, and there was absolutely no way that he was going to play a song and dance man in a minor role in the picture. And we argued about this for quite a while, but it didn't help at all. And finally, Rex became very, very adamant and said, I won't make the picture unless you get Sidney Poitier to play this role. So the gauntlet was thrown down. And so the producer, Arthur Jacobs, and I had to go to New York and try to talk Sidney Poitier into playing the role, and telling poor Sammy Davis Jr. that he was not going to be in the picture, and he was counting on that so much. And it was a very painful thing, but the end of the story is that we did get Sidney Poitier to be in the picture, but we never used him. Had to pay him off, pay Sammy Davis off. We paid off a lot of people for not being in that movie. All because of Rex, I must say.
He also paid off, I think Flanders and Swan at some stage did a score for the movie, isn't that right?
Yes, they did. One day, Rex did it again to me. I was meeting with him, and he said, Leslie Brickus wrote the music. He wrote everything. He did everything. He wrote the music and the script and the lyrics, and he did a marvelous job. I loved his work. And suddenly Rex said to me, I don't want to do any of Leslie Brickus's music. And I said, why not? He said, I think he's writing better music for everyone else in this picture, better songs, which wasn't true. And then he said, why don't you get Flanders and Swan to write my material? Well, I never heard of Flanders and Swan, and I said so. He thought I was a twit for not having heard of them. Anyhow, the long shot of it was that we had to go out and take Leslie Brickus off of working with Rex and hire Flanders and Swan, hoping they would fail. Hollywood's the only place where you hire people, hope they fail. And they wrote the music, and a month or so later, I was back in Portofino, and by coincidence, the first music came in from Flanders and Swan. And we played it with Rex and Rachel Roberts. And they seemed to like it very much. I didn't like it at all. And Rex said nothing. He said, I'm not going to comment on it before you do. A tough situation. So I said, I don't like it. And I told him why. And he looked for a long moment and said, you know, I think Richard, so he called me Richard, you're absolutely right. I think it sounded rather cheap. So it was goodbye Flanders and Swan and hello Leslie Brickus. Of course, the song that Rex particularly didn't like was Talk to the Animals, which won the Academy Award for Best Song.
If anybody wants to ask a question, do please thrust your arm up so I can actually see you. Yes, gentlemen there.
For you, Mr. Fleischer, I'm curious about how you bring your directing skills to say films like epics, The Vikings and Barabbas, which are huge epics with thousands of cast members, and then pictures like 10 Rillington Place and Boston Strangler, which are very small pictures. Do you find it very difficult to alter your directing technique?
Did everybody hear the question is really that your work ranges from great epics like Barabbas and Vikings and so on to kind of very claustrophobic movies like Strangler and 10 Rillington Place. Do you find it a problem switching your style?
No, not at all. I have no problem with that. I have a wide range, obviously, and I've been successful in both ends of the scale. But I have no problem with that. It's just a matter of adjusting to it and realizing when you're making a small picture that you're not making a big one. And I think it's a mistake directors can fall into very easily, and do. Yeah.
You've done, I mean, the point is interesting because you have ranged across every, to use that horrible word, genre, right across the board, haven't you? I don't think there's anything you haven't done. I can't think of it from sci-fi, well, a lot of sci-fi.
Yeah, I think I've done it all.
Yes. I mean, you must, would it be fair to say, even though you've ranged across it, do you have a preference there?
Well, yes, I suppose if I do. I love making movies, and it doesn't matter whether it's big or small, or comedy, or drama, or what. I just love to make films. If I feel I am capable of making the picture, making it very well. If I have a preference at all, it's for the psychological crime dramas that I've done, and I'm most fond of those films.
Well, especially as we're in this building here, we have, because the hallowed name of Sir Richard Attenborough, or Lord Attenborough as he's known, is so connected with 10 Rillington Place. I suppose at the time, was that an unorthodox piece of casting for that film? I mean, tell us about how that came around, because it was such a controversial, it was from Ludwig Kennedy's very controversial book at the time.
And somebody here has probably answered this better than I could, and that's the producer of the picture, Leslie Linder. Leslie, where are you? There he is. Stand up, Leslie. I made 2 pictures with Leslie, and 2 of the most enjoyable films I ever made, and one of them is probably the best picture I made, which is 10 Rillington Place, and he gave me the job.
Right, but bearing in mind that Leslie is in there, you can be absolutely honest with us. Tell us about the casting then of Dickie, whose character, after all, I mean, he's going to be playing. Sorry.
The editor of the picture is here too. Ernie Walter, who did a magnificent job. I owe a lot to those two gentlemen.
I don't think that Dickie is here, is he?
No.
So tell us a bit about the casting of the film. And it's a very easy film.
Leslie is a genius at casting. He's genius at producing too. He's a wonderful producer, but he has a particular knack for wonderful casting. And it was his idea to use Dickie Attenborough, and once he presented that to me, of course I saw it immediately, and I was delighted to have that. I can tell another story about him that's not so favorable casting. But I will. Dickie Attenborough, you know, we both knew was going to be wonderful in this film, and indeed he was. But we couldn't cast the part of Evans. And we looked at everyone, and one name kept coming up all the time on all the lists of actors that submitted to us, and that was John Hurt. And I'd seen John Hurt in a few films, but I really didn't know him. But every time it came up, Leslie said, "No, he's wrong for the part. Don't waste your time." So we kept looking at actors, and finally we were really literally within a week of shooting, and we had not cast this most important role. And we were getting desperate. And again, we got the finalists. I said, "Leslie, let us see everybody that we've rejected." And he said, "Fine, yes, let's do that. I said, "I want to see John Hurt too." And he said, "Well, all right, I guess we should, because we are very desperate." And I'll never forget it, sitting in Leslie's office, the door open, and John Hurt was there in the doorway. And we both looked at each other and said, "That's Christie, that's Evans, that's the guy." And we dragged him in and kissed him, and got him right into wardrobe and started working with him. And he was magnificent in the film. But Leslie learned a lesson, and so did I.
I gathered
I hope you don't mind my telling a story.
No, I must tell the thing about Attenborough, because when I approached him, he said, "Yes, I desperately want to play it lovely." And he said, "I'll tell you what I'll do." He said, "I'll shave my hair off." And you know how little hair he has. "I'll shave my hair off and I'll lose a stone in weight. I'll lose 2 stone," he said, to play the part. First day of shooting, he arrived for a few days before for a makeup test. And he put on 2 stone, and he wouldn't shave his hair, so it was 3 hours of makeup every morning.
Yeah.
Now, in order to get, I gather, this rather oppressive atmosphere, you actually sounded rather ghoulish. That you actually, right? You actually used artifacts from the original murder site.
Yes, the set. We went down to Rillington Place, which was then called Ruston Close, and the street had been condemned. Because, oddly enough, the only house that was still occupied was number 10, the house. But all the rest of the houses were empty. And you know, they go in pairs. Like one is a mirror image of the other, and they're all identical. Every house on that street, on both sides, were identical. So the art director had a wonderful idea, and he said, "I want to build the set using materials only from Rillington Place." And he did. We went in and cannibalized those buildings and took out the stairways, linoleum, gas mantles, the fireplaces, everything. And he carted it all back to the studio and reconstructed it, and we reconstructed that apartment, the whole house, interior of the whole house, all with material from Rillington Place. And it was a terrible tenement slum district. And when you walked on the stage, you've got the smell of Burlington Place right there. And we built it exactly, it's a very tiny, tiny apartment, a tiny building. But we didn't cheat, we didn't enlarge it, we kept it the actual size. But it was very creepy, because you had the feeling of this place. It was for real. Nothing was constructed. It was all there, the sink, the tea kettles, everything.
And Dickie's never been the same since?
No, I tell you, at the end of the day's work, it would take him a couple of hours to come out of playing that part. He would sit in his dressing room for a couple of hours, coming back to normalcy. He really was affected by playing that role. He hated playing it and did such a great job.
Did I see, I'm trying to catch anybody who wants to, yes, good, yeah.
Do you feel that the standard of filmmaking is improving or getting worse? And if you think it's getting worse, could you explain why you feel that?
The question, just in case you didn't hear that, was what does Richard Fleischer think of today's standard of filmmaking? Is it getting worse? If so, why?
It depends on what you're talking about as far as standard is concerned. The quality of films is fantastically good. I think films look marvelous. They are works of art and genius and technology. I've never seen such wonderful photography or such wonderful camera movement. It's absolutely, I'm flabbergasted every time I see it. I am not so taken with what films are trying to say and what they're doing, what their subject matter is. We've gotten into the graphic arts very much. Nothing is left to the imagination. The quality of story, for the most part, has taken a beating, and it's all violence. And how many car chases can you work in per reel? And car chases have replaced ideas. And that's a mistake, and it's a sorry thing to see happen. Several films have come out fairly recently going a bit in the other direction, and they've been very successful. And I can only hope it's a trend that continues. I doubt that it will, but I hope it does.
Do you go to the movies now?
Yeah, oh yes.
And who do you like to go and see? I mean, are there specific directors that you actually, whose work you'll go and watch?
No, I don't go to see a specific director's work. I really never did that. I did when I was very young. I would go out of my way to see a William Wyler picture or a Billy Wilder picture, or there's many, many others, Fred Zinnemann films. But today, no, I think directors are, in general, all pretty much equal, and they all handle the technology so well, and the films look so great. I just wish they had something better to say.
There's a question down here. Yes.
I'm very fond of The Girl in the Red Velvet Swing, and I wondered how you felt initially about the casting of Joan Collins as Evelyn Nesbit.
This is a question about The Girl in the Red Velvet Swing, and how did our guest think originally about casting Joan Collins in the movie?
Well, when I got a look at her, it was her first American movie, and she just looked great. I just thought, this is the girl. She was so beautiful, and I'd seen some of her film here that she'd done here, and I just felt that she could play that role. And I just thought it was very good casting.
Do you want that expanded on at all?
I don't know how I can expand on that. When you see someone you think is right for the film, you use them, and I thought that she would do very well, and I was extremely gratified by, I thought, a splendid performance on her part.
Being a sort of a recreation of a real life, that has been, if you like, a thread, of course, through a number of works, and that we can't leave that without mentioning Boston Strand. And I haven't read Tony Curtis's autobiography, but again, I suppose that was an extraordinary piece of casting at the time, wasn't it?
Yes. He was the last person in the world to think of to to cast in that role. And I think that's why I thought of him, because we thought of lots of other people, and again, I don't know, something inside me said Tony Curtis, and I tell you, it's just as mysterious and as highfalutin as it sounds. I just had an instinct about Tony. I'd worked with him before in the Vikings, but I'd seen a lot of his other films, and I saw in him a truly wonderful actor hidden under that great thick facade that he has. The funny character, you know, the jazzy kind of guy. But I saw him in The Defiant Ones and in Sweet Smell of Success. And there was a film that he made about an American Indian, which was wonderful. And,
The Outsider. The Outsider.
The Outsider, yes. So Tony somehow had heard that I was interested in him, and he wrote me, he called me, wrote me, besieged me to let him do the part. And I went in to see Richard Zanuck, who was the head of 20th Century Fox at that time, and the producer, Robert Fryer, and said, I think you're going to throw me out of the office, but I really think Tony Curtis should play the part. And you know what? They threw me out of the office. So I called Tony and told him that there was just no way. I was heartbroken. I really thought he could play this role. So a few days later, I got a picture, still photograph, of this very interesting looking character. Looked just like the Boston Strangler should look. And it was from Tony Curtis, and it was Tony. And he had made himself up, put a little prosthesis on his nose, dressed properly, and took his own picture, held the camera out, snapped his own photo, and sent it to me. I looked at that, and I walked right over to Zanuck's office. I walked in, put the picture on his desk, and I said, "What do you think of this guy for the part?" And he looked at it and he said, "Can he act?" And that's, Tony got the part because of that.
There's a question up near the back there. I saw him. Yes.
What was it about Soylent Green that you liked doing? Why did you choose to make Soylent Green?
This is, before we came on stage, before the audience had been watching Soylent Green.
Yeah.
What particularly attracted you about Soylent Green? And, I mean, it'd be interesting to know a little technically about the movie.
The subject matter attracted me. I think it's an important film. I thought it had an important message to make, and it was a picture that said something. And it was about a picture about the future, but in my eyes it was not the distant future. So there wasn't really a science fiction film. It's about the day after tomorrow. And now I think it's about tomorrow. So the film was probably well ahead of its time.
Very well ahead of its time, so solid.
Okay.
I'd just like to say, if I could, that I went to see that film in 1973, and when we left the cinema, there were one or two people lying about on the steps begging, and it was very unusual then. And I remember my husband turned to me and said, "It's quite right, that film, it's all going to happen just as it shows in the film."
This is a delightful testimonial. This delightful lady saw the movie in '73 and agrees it was well ahead of its time because they came out of it, some other beggars around, and her husband said it's all going to happen one day. So it was a critic. It was a good critic.
Actually, it's the only film we ever saw that stopped us eating dinner afterwards.
Well, thank you. I like that.
Carry on, because I'm interested in some of the technique of it.
Well, to get in the scenes that were in this little apartment that Heston and Eddie Robinson lived in, I wanted to get the feeling of compression and heat, that it was a sweaty world and a cramped world because of the overpopulation. So I shot everything in those scenes with a long focal length lens, which compresses the walls. It brings everything closer together. While the set was very small and limited, I still wanted to crowd it up and still have room for the actors to move in. And also I had set pieces which I could move around to place in front of the lens so that you had kind of perspective between the lens and the set. And those pipes that I used, I juggled around, used in every shot practically. Tilted the camera a little bit to give you a feeling of unease. And also the green atmosphere effect, I developed myself and made that filter myself with green cloudy water, which we shot through, so that it wasn't just a dead filter which would give itself away, but the filter itself had very slight movement in it, and it was green. And we put that in later, because if you actually shoot film with a colored filter in it, you will live to regret it, because you cannot change it if you don't like it. And here, I made my filters separately, and then put them in where I wanted them and to the degree I wanted them, and we could vary it. And I thought they worked rather well.
Yes.
The early British Disney movies were quite heavily storyboarded. I was wondering if they carried that through 20,000 Leagues, and if not, have you ever worked storyboards for film?
This is a question about storyboarding. A lot of the Disney films have been heavily storyboarded.
Live action ones.
Live action films particularly. Did you work with storyboards on 20,000 Leagues, or have you worked with storyboards on other films?
20,000 Leagues was completely storyboarded. But it was storyboarded because it was the policy of the company to story. They never made a live action film, so they thought they were making a cartoon. And cartoons are storyboarded, so they went ahead and storyboarded the whole picture, which was very interesting to me, but I never looked at them again after they were made. Occasionally I use storyboards when I have a very complex action sequence with a lot of mats and trick shots and special effect things. I used quite a bit of storyboards in Fantastic Voyage because there's so many matte shots in it. And in order to know how to line up the camera and know what the limits are where the actors can walk and can't walk, you have to have a storyboard. Otherwise, it makes it very difficult for the matte artists to, you have to redo the mattes, and that's very expensive. So that's the only time. I have a complicated chase sequence and a lot of tricks. I have it storyboarded so that I can show it to the stuntmen and say, this is exactly the kind of shot I'm looking for, and let them work it out. So, yes, but not for storyboarding. I do not, in general, do not use at all.
Yes, John? Yes.
I always thought that Barabbas was one of the great 70-mil epics. Although quite a lot of the other 70-mil and big spectacles of the 60s have been revived, this one hasn't been. It never appears on television. I wonder if there's some rights problem to it, why we can't seem to see it now.
This is Barabbas, which I'm glad has been finally mentioned. I wish I were myself. That like a number of epics have been revived over the years, because it was a 70-mil epic at the time. Why is there a problem over rights? We haven't really sort of seen it for a long time, I don't think.
I don't believe there's any rights problem. It does show in America around Easter time. That's the only I wonder why. No, I don't know. Maybe it isn't that popular a film. It was more popular in Europe than it was in the United States. And it showed this last Easter. But that's it, so once a year you get to see a movie.
Veronica.
A film I'm particularly fond of yours, The Narrow Margin, was recently remade. Did you see the remake, and how did you react to it?
The question was that they fairly recently remade The Narrow Margin. Did you see the remake, and if so, did you approve of it, I should say?
Yes, no. Yes, I saw it. No, I didn't know how to prove it. I thought they fumbled the ball and bollocksed it up and made every mistake that they could with that picture. They did two major errors, major blunders. Mind you, it's a very well-made film. The train, unfortunately, was going in the wrong direction. But the film is very well made. The actors were excellent. A beautifully mounted film. But they made two major blunders. Three, actually. One was they fell into the Hollywood trap that everyone does when they take a stage play and they say, let's open it up. So they decided to open up a picture that lives on the claustrophobic quality of the film, the claustrophobic quality of the story. It takes place on a train, and there's no place to hide on a train. That's what makes the story work. That's the wheels on the locomotive. So they said, let's open it up. Now right away, they don't know what the movie is about, if that's what they started out to do. The second thing was in the film noir kind of movie. This is a very typical film noir, where no one in the picture is what they seem to be. Everyone is really somebody else, pretending to be somebody else. They got rid of that. Everybody is just who you think they are. No surprise there. No big surprise when they killed the wrong woman. And then discover have done that. And then we discover that she's a policewoman and not the gangster's wife. And there's all of those wonderful twists gone out of this picture. And there was a third one, but I forgot my The third one really is most ridiculous of all, because the director of the film kept insisting there was not a remake. There seemed to be something very distasteful to him just to admit that he was making a remake. And he wrote had a large article in the New York Times saying this wasn't a remake. And then they go ahead and describe the story, which is exactly my story, plot point for plot point, all the way down. And the only thing they changed was the title of the picture. My film was called The Narrow Margin, and his was called Narrow Margin. That was the big change.
I'd rather liked it, actually. Tony.
Mr. Fleischer, first of all, before asking a rather complex question, I'd just like to welcome you to the NFT and thank you for all the pleasure that you've given me as I've viewed your career during my picture-going years. The question is, and it's something you've touched on, but haven't discussed, you are unique in being the only director who has worked virtually from black and white to show scan, utilizing every process, including using 3D in the first 3D phase and the second 3D phase with both Arena and Amityville 3D. You also worked in Toray Technorama, and you were at CinemaScope at the very beginning. And this is unique in a marvelous career. Can you discuss which your favorite screen formats are, and which formats present some specific problems, and what comes after show scan?
Well, I think if I could hear it, I'm sure you all heard it. Did you?
Yes, I think we all did.
Thank you very much, first of all, for your very kind words. And it is getting a little late.
Yes,
I don't think
this
I
is like a
would
final
go
question.
into that as deeply as I'd like to, but I have been privileged to work in all of these aspect ratios. And I must say I get a kick out of after them all. I think I'm most comfortable in CinemaScope. Perhaps it's because I was kind of brought up in CinemaScope after widescreen came in. I've done just about as you say about everything. The most exciting one is ShowScan for me, because that's a new giant system. And I found that very exciting. It was a very experimental film to work on. And I think that something like ShowScan is the next step with interactive work with the audience. I don't know how many of you have ever had the experience of being in theme parks where they have these huge big screens, giant screens with pin-sharp focus and virtually 3D clarity and appearance. And the seats work in coordination with the action on the screen. And you are experiencing, as an audience, 90% of the actuality of being there, and yet without any danger to yourself. It's a really unique experience, and I am sure that's the next step forward. I would love to be part of it. I've talked to so many people. Please make the first interactive movie feature where the seats work along with the screen, and you make $1 zillion and give the audience a thrill of a lifetime. And so far it hasn't happened, but it's inevitable. It will happen.
Richard Fleischer, we could have talked about Dino, we could have talked about the Salkins, we could have talked about Howard Hughes, Arnold Schwarzenegger, all these people who work, Bridget Nielsen even.
Oh, yes.
We'll have to have you back again. Meanwhile, can I, on behalf of you all, thank Richard Fleischer.